peeps, welcome to another video. Today it is part 4 of the Butterick 6018 sew along. Today we're going to be putting together the skirt and attaching it to the bodice. So let's get started. Next step is 31, stitch skirt front 9 sections together at centre front. So I'm going to be French seaming all of my skirt seams because it finishes the raw edges. It's a finish that I really like. My fabric is conducive to doing that with just 2 layers, and I don't have enough bias binding to bind each and every edge. You could overlock yours, you could pink yours, you could overcast yours on your machine if you don't have an overlocker. There are many different finishing techniques. Just use your favourite to make sure that your skirt edge seams are finished. The other tip that I have for you is my fabric doesn't have a distinct right and wrong side, and if anyone's watched the Great British Sewing Bee recently and the linen jacket episode in particular, you will all know with fabrics like this it's very easy to go very wrong. So my tip is to put a pin in the wrong side of the fabric, so just in the middle here, and I'll show you when I've done it, just so that you know that that is the wrong side of your fabric, and to do that for every single piece. This is what I mean. So I have a pin in the wrong side of my fabric, which is going to help me greatly, making sure that I don't sew the wrong side, sew anything the wrong way out. So the first thing that we need to do is put the wrong sides of the fabric together to sew a French seam. So I'm going to need to switch these around, pin everything together, and we're going to sew the first pass at 1/4 inch. So that's my centre front sewn together. As I mentioned earlier, I like to do as many processes as possible at the sewing machine or at the ironing board before I have to move on. So I am going to skip on to step 32 and stitch the skirt side front sections to side edges of skirt front. And you will match up the notches, so your double notches will be your side seams, and the single notches at the waist and the hip area are the ones that get attached to this edge of the front. So at the moment I've got lots of raw edges, and this is the right side of the fabric, so I'm going to do the whole skirt the whole way around. The one thing that I'm going to omit is the skirt back, because we're going to be putting a zipper in there, so we don't need to sew that shut, but we do need to bind that edge. Okay, I have sewn all of the skirt panels together, wrong sides together at 1/4 inch. I've trimmed each of those seams down to just under or just over 1/8 inch, and I'm now going to press everything, press all these seams nice and flat, and then I can sew it again at 3/8 inch. And that will be the skirt done. I have left the back seam open, so I have ignored step 33 that tells you to sew the skirt back together, because as I've mentioned before, we've added a seam to the skirt, the bodice back, to put a zip in, and we need that to continue down into the skirt back. So slightly different to the way that the instructions ask you to do it, but not that different. So going to go and press everything. All of my seams have been pressed, so I'm now going to sew each one at 3/8 inch. If you did move your needle over, like I mentioned earlier, remember to move it back this time, because as I say, the toe of my foot is 3/8 inch away from the needle, so it's perfect for this. Just run the fabric against the edge there and I get the 3/8 inch seam. So I'm going to do every single one of those seams on the skirt. Okay, all my seams are sewn. I've bound the centre back seams as well with bias binding, and again, as I said, I like to do as many processes whilst I'm sat down, so this needs pressing and all of these need pressing, so I thought I would get them all done so that I can press them all at the same time. So apart from the centre front, which I will obviously have to pick a side to press to, I'm going to press all of the seams towards the back. So I think the centre front, I'll just, you know, press it left or press it right depending on where or which way I lay it down on the ironing board. But yes, I'm going to press all of my seams. Okay, so it's now time to attach the bodice to the skirt, but we have a little bit of prep work to do first. So the pattern does call for you to stay stitch this edge on the outer, and I have done that on both the outer and the lining. And for the lining, I'm actually going to use this as my pressing line, because I want to be able to sew the lining down to the main fabric by stitching in the ditch. So I need this to be just slightly bigger than 5/8 inch. So I have stay stitched at 1/2 inch on both the outer fabric and the inner. So I'm now going to use this to press it up. I'm going to press it to the wrong side, and this is think you can see here. Yeah, this is the lining, so I'm going to press the lining, the edge of the lining up to the wrong side. I'm then going to use some lightweight interfacing on these parts, so to just reinforce where the zip is going. We're going to need to do this on the bodice and the top part of the skirt to make sure that the zip has a nice firm base to go onto. Okay, so we're up to step 36, which is with right sides together, pin skirt to bodice, matching centres, clipping bodice front where necessary, based stitch, press seam towards bodice. So again, we're going to be matching the centre front, and it's going to be the centre back that we leave open for the zip, not the side as it would usually have us do. So I'm going to do that now. And this is another reason that you stay stitch, is because there is a curve, so you may need to clip up to the stay stitching to get the bodice to fit to the skirt. My fabric has some stretch in it, so I found that so far I haven't needed to do that, but you may need to do that on yours. Got everything pinned. I've matched the centre front, the notches, then the darts to the skirt seams. You'll want to note as well that the edges of the dart don't match up with the edge of the skirt seam, but it does at the stitching line, so that's where you want to be careful and put your pins. Side seam, back, and then side back edge. I'm going to sew all the way along there at 5/8 of an inch. I've got the skirt sewn to the bodice. I've pressed the seam up towards the bodice, and I have pinked the edge just because this fabric is literally fraying the minute I look at it. If you have any questions at all, please let me know in the comment section down below, and I will do my best to answer them for you. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye!